Where do we go? This is the 17th time I've left my home.
Looming famine, displacement, and death. We look at the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The controversial accusation of genocide in this war and all war.
Genocide is thought of as the crime of crimes, where you're actually trying to destroy the population.
And Israel's public and internal debate on the path forward in the war. This is PBS News Weekly. I'm Nick Schifrin. First, an update to a story we've previously reported. The International Court of Justice, the UN's top court, came back today with a preliminary order in response to South Africa's case accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. The court declined South Africa's request to order a ceasefire, but also declined Israel's request to throw out the case and ordered Israel not to commit what you just heard is known as the crime of all crimes.
The State of Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip.
Palestinian human rights groups call the ruling, quote, a judicial thunderbolt that requires the U.S. to restrain its aid to Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was committed to international humanitarian law and accused Hamas of attempting genocide in a war that he said would continue.
Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it.
The UN says 1.7 million of Gaza's 2.2 million residents are currently displaced. Martin Griffiths, the UN's Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, spoke with me about the continued humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The WFP said today that very little food aid has traveled into central and northern Gaza and that there is still a risk of famine. How serious is that risk?
It's a very serious risk, and what's quite striking about it is how quickly the move to possible famine is going in Gaza if you compare it to other parts of the world. We estimate maybe 400,000 people are seriously at risk of famine. Moving aid around in Gaza is, in all practical terms, impossible. Getting food to these people since October 7th has been very, very difficult. It's a very, very rapid decline, and it's very worrying.
Today, the Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy said that there are, quote, no limitations on humanitarian aid, and he added this.
It is lamentable that UN officials who have also been covering up for the fact that Hamas hijacks aid and covering up for the fact that it wages war out of hospitals are trying to cover up their own systemic failure by demanding the opening of new entry routes when there is already adequate and excess capacity at the existing ones.
What's your response to that statement?
I think it's extremely unfair. I think it's wrong to suggest that we don't need more entry points. But most importantly, if the conditions inside Gaza, the operational conditions, don't exist for the distribution of aid, don't blame us for that. They result from the conflict, and they include safety of movement, they include roads which are not mined, they include assurances that places that we will deliver aid to won't be attacked, they include hospitals that are not places of war, they include not taking out of our trucks when they're being screened on the way in. So I don't think it's right to blame humanitarian agencies for what is a very, very, very difficult operation.
You mentioned hospitals. Hamas operates near hospitals and has fired rockets near hospitals. The U.S. and Israel accuses Hamas of using hospitals as command and control. And in southern Gaza, just in the last few days, we have seen Israeli forces surrounding at least 2 hospitals. What are your concerns for the patients in those hospitals and also the displaced Gazans who use the hospitals as a refuge place?
Hospitals are protected under international humanitarian law and should not ever be used by military forces from wherever they come, from whichever party, Hamas included, as places of refuge or operational bases. So to have a situation where the few hospitals that still continue to exist, where the patients find themselves in the middle of a war zone, where entry into and exit out of is through fighting, is, of course, a terrible, terrible thing to see and a terrible stain on our humanity. And if that is because Hamas is sheltering there, then they should not do so. The central aspect of the tragedy of Gaza, in my view, is the total uncertainty for civilians about what's going to happen to them next. Where will they be? Where can they find food? Will there be safety? Where can that be found? And the hospital example, if you like, of that encapsulates that sense of absolute danger and uncertainty about the future.
Martin Griffiths, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for having me on.
Israel's military suffered its deadliest day since Hamas's October 7th terrorist attacks this week, with nearly 24 soldiers killed in Gaza. While Israel's government vowed to continue the war, tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians continue to be caught in the middle. A prayer for the dead. A family grappling with grief. Sergeant First Class Hadar Kapuluk was a 23-year-old reservist killed in Gaza. Sergeant Major Alai Levy was from the same unit. His mother said a final goodbye, and his father delivered a message of determination.
Let's show our enemies that we are strong, and even in such a difficult situation, we do not break. Please say with me 3 times, the people of Israel live.
An Israeli officer described how 21 reservists died in the destroyed building behind him. The 261st Brigade was preparing to demolish the building with their own explosives when a Palestinian militant opened fire, said Israeli Army spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari.
The first rocket hit one of the buildings in which explosives had been laid out. The hit apparently led to the explosion that caused the collapse of the building and the collapse of the building next to it.
The fighting is most intense in southern Gaza on Hamas's home turf, literally. Hamas video shows a fighter firing from a bedroom window, and Hamas fighters shooting from inside blown-out buildings, aiming at Israeli soldiers in buildings across the way. Israeli military video shows soldiers in close combat and exposing what Israel says is a Hamas tunnel next to Khan Yunis schools. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed victory.
Together we will fight, and God willing, together we will win.
In southern Gaza, victims of the war arrive by donkey cart. Ahed Masma in green bears no relation to the victims. He was, instead, the bearer of bodies he found near his home. He brought them here to try and give dignity to the dead.
Seeing them gives one chills. No matter how hard it was, we would have brought them, even if there was an aircraft above us wanting to target us.
Others are caught in an endless cycle of displacement, fleeing farther and farther south into less and less land.
Where do we go? This is the 17th time I've left my home. Where should I go?
More than 25,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Our colleagues at Independent Television News captured images of one more death. As John Irvine reports, their crew in Gaza documented the killing, and a warning: this story includes images of violence.
This is the edge of the supposedly safe area called Al-Mawasi that the Israelis have been encouraging Gazan civilians to flee to. These makeshift homes have been vacated because the war is getting closer. The billowing smoke was evidence of the new Israeli offensive in Khan Yunis that has been forcing more families to evacuate and seek safety elsewhere.
No place safety in Gaza. Everywhere you are going, you will find the Israeli army. They are shoot us at home, any building, in the street, everywhere you are. They will give you a chance, sometimes just for 5 minutes, sometimes do not give you any chance to take your clothes, to take your children, to take your family, and to get out of the building. This is our life in Gaza. It's very difficult.
These pictures were filmed by a cameraman working for ITV News in Gaza. As he moved forwards towards the combat zone, he noticed this group of men doing their utmost to appear non-threatening, trying to proceed with care. They wanted to reach 2 other family members and get them out of harm's way.
I have my mother and brother in there, with around 50 or 70 displaced people in another house. The Israelis came to us and told us to evacuate, but they didn't let my brother out. We want to go and try to get them, God willing.
The interview complete, our cameraman walked away. And then this happened. The interviewee had been shot and fatally wounded. You can see them place their flag on his chest. As he was carried away, the white flag was turning red. Carry him, they've killed him, yells this youth. Then suddenly, more gunfire. They scream at a child, telling him to find cover. By this stage, the man's wife, his widow, has heard what happened. And as she rushes to the scene, she meets the party carrying away the body on a makeshift stretcher. When they're satisfied they're a safe distance away, they stop. And the mourning starts.
An Israeli defense official told PBS NewsHour an Israeli analysis of the audio found that 2 weapons fired shots. They say one was an automatic that fired 3 bullets, and the rate of fire does not correspond to any rifle used by the Israeli military. The official added they're investigating further. Both sides in the Israel-Hamas war have accused each other of intending to commit or carrying out a campaign of genocide against their respective populations. But what is the term's legal definition, and what role does that play in its use in public and political rhetoric? Legal experts spoke with the NewsHour's Dima Zain, and another warning, this segment also includes distressing images.
Genocide. South Africa has formally accused Israel of genocide in the International Court of Justice.
The application places Israel's genocidal acts and omissions within the broader context of Israel's 75-year apartheid.
But what exactly is genocide? How is it prosecuted in the international justice system? And what's the difference between the heated political rhetoric around genocide and these formal charges?
Genocide is thought of as the crime of crimes, where you're actually trying to destroy the population as such.
Layla Sadat served as a special advisor to the International Criminal Court prosecutor and is now with the Washington University Law School. At the heart of any legal case for genocide is the 1948 Convention, established by the United Nations in the aftermath of World War II and the Holocaust.
The draft Convention on Genocide is being presented to the General Assembly today.
The codification in the convention itself really is a description of what happened during the Holocaust. Subsequently, there was a hesitation to expand the use of this term because of its sort of symbolic importance as this was the crime of crimes.
But politicians and activists often use genocide in their rhetoric to draw attention to mass atrocities and war crimes.
The term has developed a weight and a political importance.
Carrie Wiggum is with the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention at Binghamton University.
It's really understandable that groups of people who are suffering mass atrocities, who are the victims of atrocities, often want the word genocide to be applied to what they're doing because it's a way of drawing political and social attention to the harms that they're suffering.
Wiggum says the phrase itself has taken on new meaning outside of the international courts.
Whether or not a situation meets the legal definition of genocide, I think it's still important to pay attention to groups of people who are trying to use this term and have it applied to their case, because usually what it means is that they are experiencing large-scale identity-based violence.
In the ICJ case of South Africa versus Israel, South Africa is asking the ICJ to order Israel to stop its military action in Gaza. Since both South Africa and Israel are UN member states and both are signatories to the 1948 Genocide Convention, they are obligated to not commit genocide and to also prevent and punish it. It could take years to litigate the full case. It's important to also note that the ICJ is not the only international court that can declare an act of war as genocide. Unlike the ICJ, the International Criminal Court does not include every UN member state. Instead, it's a treaty-based court. Several major world powers, including the United States and Russia, are not state parties to the court and don't accept its jurisdiction. But the bar is high to meet the legal definition for genocide, regardless of the court.
We know the law, it's the facts that are really hard to ascertain. You have to prove a criminal case beyond a reasonable doubt. And in order to do that with respect to genocide, you have to show not only that the act was committed, you'd have to show one of the prohibited acts and that the accused actually committed that act with the intent to destroy the group in whole or in part.
But to some, using the word genocide to describe Israel's military campaign causes offense, given the term's origin. Dov Waxman, the Rosalind Arthur Gilbert Foundation professor of Israel Studies at UCLA, explains.
Accusing Israel as a state of conducting a genocide puts it effectively into the same company of perpetrators of genocide as Nazi Germany, for example, or the Hutus in Rwanda, or Milosevic's regime in the case of the Serbian genocide. All of those previous instances which are widely recognized as genocide. And for many, that is, not only does that kind of delegitimize Israel itself by putting it into that company, but also Israel's legitimacy in the eyes of the world is itself tied to genocide, specifically to the Nazi genocide against Jews.
While the focus is on the term genocide, Wiggum says legally there is no difference in terms of gravity when it comes to crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide.
When people think about the Holocaust, they think about industrialized killing. They think about death camps. They think about gas chambers and this industrialized plan to destroy groups. That is not a requirement of genocide. And in fact, many genocides occur through the kinds of violence that we are seeing in Gaza right now, the kinds of violence, and oftentimes in the case of Rwanda, it occurs from one person going up to another person and killing them with their own hands, looking at them in the eyes.
There are a whole host of other crimes, war crimes, for example, that Israel might be accused of committing, which may not amount to genocide, but are still very, very serious violations of international law. To some extent, the focus on genocide is in danger of distracting our attention from the broader issues of the violation of laws of war during the course of this conflict by both Israel and Hamas.
Wiggum says understanding genocide as a long-term social and political process is crucial to preventing it from happening in the first place.
There are actions that can be taken, both domestically and by the international community, to help impede them from escalating even further. The problem is, oftentimes we turn a blind eye to those earlier stages of genocide, and we only start paying attention when large-scale violence is taking place. And it's much, much harder to stop a genocide from happening when it's already reached that stage of active killing, of active destruction.
As the war rages on, so too will both the public and legal debate over the use and application of this term. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Dima Zain.
As the war in Gaza nears the 4-month mark, there are broad disagreements within Israel and between Israel and its partners on the way forward.
Israeli politics is always a contact sport. But today, in an Israeli parliament committee meeting, the families of hostages held in Gaza erupted.
I ask you, if these were your children, what would you have done?
Hostage families are increasingly challenging the government, including outside Prime Minister Netanyahu's house. They want to prioritize their loved ones over prosecuting the war in Gaza. That debate is now inside Israel's war cabinet. Gadi Eisenkot is a war cabinet observer and former army chief. In December, his son Gal was killed fighting in Gaza. He promised to make the right decisions for those who have sacrificed. Last week, he criticized Netanyahu and said the best way to release the hostages was a ceasefire.
It is impossible to return the hostages alive in the near future without a deal. And whoever is selling lies to the public, then he's selling lies. There's no other way to put it.
Publicly, Netanyahu's rejected any deal that would require Israel to stop the war and its effort to uncover Hamas tunnels that it says hid hostages, including this one under the southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis.
I utterly reject the Hamas monster's capitulation terms. Only total victory will ensure the elimination of Hamas and the return of all our hostages.
But U.S. officials say there are negotiations over a longer pause in exchange for the release of most, if not all, of the hostages.
There are a number of types of two-state solutions.
There's also a longer-term Netanyahu disagreement with the U.S. On Friday, President Biden reiterated he believed Israel's security would be best guaranteed by a two-state solution.
But Bibi has said he's opposed. No, he didn't say no, he didn't say that.
But over the weekend, Netanyahu made clear, at least publicly, that is exactly what he said.
My insistence is what prevented for years the establishment of a Palestinian state, which would pose an existential danger to Israel. As long as I am prime minister, I will continue to firmly stand by it.
To discuss the next steps in the war and the debates over the best way to release the hostages and over the two-state solution, we get two views. Retired Brigadier General Yonatan Shimshoni had a 25-year career in the Israel Defense Force. He's now one of the leaders of the group Commanders for Israeli Security. And retired Major General Gershon HaKohen had a 42-year career in the Israel Defense Force. He's now at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Bar-Ilan University. Thanks very much to you, both of you. Welcome to the NewsHour. Yoni Shimshoni, let me start with you. What is the best way, in your opinion, to get the release of the hostages currently in Gaza?
Okay, well, the best way is clearly not the way that we're trying to do it now, which is guided by some theory of total force, force only, no diplomacy, no political direction. And the more we apply force at the moment, not that we shouldn't have during the first 4 to 6 weeks, it's causing the hostages to wilt and to be in greater jeopardy. So we need to somehow create some kind of deal that will include stepping down, stepping back, or doing whatever it takes to create a deal that will have a political dimension to it to release the hostages.
Gershon HaKohen, do you agree? Do you think Israel should do whatever it takes, quote unquote, to make a deal?
We must fight in order to defeat Hamas because they actually bringing an existential threat to Israel. It is really an existential warfare, and we cannot focus ourselves only on the other mission to release the hostages. Actually, we are working in both sides with these two efforts simultaneously, not just either or. And yet, the offer that was just put on the table is, in my eyes, a kind of unconditional surrender of Israel. It means a demand of Hamas to stop the war.
Yoni Shimshoni, what about that? The idea that the Israeli government is both pursuing a military option to pressure Hamas, but also being willing to actually pursue this diplomatic path. We know from reports that it is willing or considering a longer pause for the release of hostages.
The more we apply force, they will be in a last stand type of mindset. And if they get into a last stand kind of mindset, they will probably kill all the hostages in the last stand. The other option is that they would be willing to seek a secure exit and of some kind. And in that case, they would use the hostages. And the logic of that situation suggests that we should go for a deal as quickly as we can. And if it requires a diplomatic ceasefire, whatever it is, do it now, because the logic of this situation says either there's a deal or we lose all the hostages.
Gershon HaKohen, is that right? Could more military pressure, in fact, lead to the death of the hostages?
That is really a danger. Everyone aware about that. We cannot ignore it. But on the other side is the real existence of Israel. We cannot permit ourselves not to defeat Hamas in that occasion. We are not just making pressure upon Hamas in order to release the hostages. We are struggling to defend the Israel existence. This is the main goal of the war.
Yoni Shimshoni, let's look beyond today. Who do you believe should run Gaza after the war ends?
Ultimately, it's a Palestinian environment, it's a Palestinian population, and if anybody's going to lead it, it is going to be a Palestinian polity of one kind or another.
Gershon HaKohen, who do you think should run Gaza after the war ends?
Israel could really support Gaza to be a kind of state, and we are expecting, and we have the right to expect, that this state will be in alliances with Israel and not an enemy. Right now, the Palestinian Authority is not in alliances with Israel, far away from that. They are supporting terrorists. We can live with the idea that United States really insisted that Gaza will stay completely under Palestinian hands. Okay, but not with Palestinian Authority.
Gershon HaKohen, Yoni Shimshoni, thank you very much to you both.
Thank you
very much.
And that's PBS News Weekly. I'm Nick Schifrin. For all of us, thanks so much for watching.